This is for you.
Why would I want that?
I saw it and I thought it was pretty. Don't girls like stuff like this?
Maybe stupid girls.
Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in this video today, it's going to be a very exciting one. This one is going to be focusing on making the ultimate Avatar Last Airbender deck, and this one is going to be 100% compromised of the cards within the set, maybe besides lands because it's going to be hard to mana fix within a 5-color deck. But besides that point, we're going to be using cards from the main set, Jumpstart set, the bonus sheet, as well as secret Lairs, so there's a lot of cards that you could jam pack into this, and it would be okay, but of course in this video, I wanted to choose the best and most optimal ones. And if you are an Avatar The Last Airbender fan like me, this one is going to be very exciting because usually every so often when there's a new Universes Beyond set, I like to just make videos only focusing on that set and making a deck around it. So who is the commander of this deck? It would be obviously none other than Avatar Aang, mainly because it is a 5-color commander. It may look like a 4-color commander because of the 4 pips up on the top right corner. However, if you flip it over and in the text box, it shows all 5 colors, so you could use every color and every card in your arsenal within this deck. And so I am super excited for this, mainly because I am a fan of the show itself. I've watched this about 3 or 4 times, once with my wife, and it's honestly a blast. And so with that said, without further ado, let's get it started by making the ultimate Avatar The Last Airbender deck.
Oh, hooray! In a lifetime of evil, at least he didn't add animal cruelty to the list.
So first things first, of course, we have to talk about Avatar Aang. He is going to be the leader and commander of this deck for red, green, white, and blue, so 4 mana total for a legendary creature, human avatar ally. He has flying and firebending too, and whenever you waterbend, earthbend, firebend, or airbend, draw a card. Then if you've done all 4 this turn, transform Avatar Aang. So if you mastered all 4 of the elements, of course, he will enter the avatar state as Aang Master of Elements. He has flying, and spells you cast cost Wooburg less to cast. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you may transform Aang Master of Elements. If you do, gain 4 life, draw 4 cards, and put 4 1/1 counters on him, and he deals 4 damage to each opponent. And on the flip side, he also has a 6/6 body. So there is a lot going on with this commander. Personally, I actually just like him as a draw engine. Having all 4 of the elements in the deck, you just get to draw cards. I feel like the easiest way to do so is by using firebending. He has firebending himself when you swing in with him, and maybe a couple other cards that have firebending. You get to just draw a card when you have that ability go online. So to be honest, if anything else, you don't really even need to flip him. All you really need to do is just constantly do any kind of bending, and you're just going to get so much card draw. I think that is just powerful alone enough. But of course, it isn't a May ability. If you have done all 4 in one turn, you do have to flip them over, which is not really that bad, to be honest. If you have a lot of cards in your hand, they will cost Wooburg less to cast too, so this is going to be perfect. Definitely a very powerful commander, especially for an Avatar deck. So now that I've talked about Avatar Aang being a great card draw engine, now I wanted to shift my focus and talking about what the rest of the video is going to look like. I am first going to talk about the staples of the deck in pure Avatar fashion. Then I'll focus on all the elements: firebending, earthbending, waterbending, and airbending, because they all work perfectly with Avatar Aang. And then finally, I'll go over some win cons. So first things first, staples of the deck. We want to make sure it's a good functioning deck. We need to have a lot of good ramp options, card draw options, and interaction in order to succeed. Like I mentioned previously, the mana base is going to be a little bit more optimized. You can kind of change it to your budget. I did put in the deck the rare land cycle. I think they actually work pretty well, mainly because they each give a bending kind of ability. But overall, the set actually has some decent ramp options. One I like in particular is Badger Mole Cub. This is probably going to be one of the chase cards and maybe a little bit more expensive. When this creature enters, Earthbend 1, one, whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green mana, so all those creatures you earthbend are going to tap for more mana. That is going to be huge, so that way we could cast more spells. There is a rampant growth and Harrow effect with shared roots and cycle of renewal. Each of these will get a basic land for us from our library and put it onto the battlefield. Cycle of renewal will sacrifice a land and put 2 basic land cards onto the battlefield tapped, but if you want to get any kind of lands and put them onto the battlefield, elemental teachings will be pretty good. Search your library for up to 4 lands with different names and reveal them. An opponent will choose 2 of those cards, put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is okay for tutoring specific lands. Obviously your opponent will have to pick which ones you put on the battlefield, but that still is okay. There are some other mana dorks in this set, like Hermetic Herbalist or even Rashus Audience. They tap for mana or potentially will tap for more mana depending on if you have a lesson or if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, but I think the best mana dork by far is the Great Divide Guide. Each land and ally you control has tap 1 mana of any color. This is perfect for a 5-color deck. It acts as a chromatic lantern along with having all your allies act as mana dorks, adding 1 mana of any color. That is going to be huge. Considering this is a 5-color deck, we need to tap for multiple colors of mana. This will help us get there easily. And if you're feeling a little nice to your opponents, Heartbeat of Spring or Rites of Flourishing can get you some brownie points. Heartbeat of Spring will get additional mana when you tap a mana, but that applies for everybody. The same applies for Rite of Flourishing. Everyone will draw an extra card at the beginning of each player's draw step or even play an additional land. Also within the Commander product, there is Arcane Signet and Soul Ring. Each of these are going to be great for helping you get that full Avatar theme. I also like Tectonic Split. Even though it's a little expensive, you may sacrifice a lot of lands, but it does have hexproof and lands you control have tap at 3 mana of any one color. This is going to be huge again for a 5-color deck. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about the Great Henge. This basically does it all. Of course, it is at a hefty mana cost, but if you have a powerful enough creature, it could potentially just cost 2 green mana. This taps for 2 green, you gain 2 life, and if a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. So this is doing everything: ramp, life gain, card draw, and buffing up a creature. What's not to love about this? Obviously, it is an expensive card, but hopefully with this reprint, it could go down quite a bit. Speaking of card draw, that is what I'm going to go into next. Avatar Aang is, of course, a card draw engine whenever you're doing any sort of bending, but of course, we want to add a little bit more into here to make the deck consistent, because Avatar Aang has 4 different mana pips. You definitely want to have some other options and not just rely on him. One of the best early game card draw engines would be Mystic Remora in this beautiful frame. It has cumulative upkeep 1, so every time you go to your next upkeep, it's going to increase the count. For the cost, you can either pay into it or just put it into the graveyard, but it has a very powerful early game ability. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 4 mana. This is really good in CDH, but is okay in casual. Not the best in my opinion, but still it's pretty powerful, getting you a couple card draws all for 1 mana. Because we might go into an aggressive theme, I also like the Blue Spirit. This is also pretty good because it can give the first creature we cast flash on each turn. And not only that, whenever a non-token creature you control enters during combat, you draw a card. Because we might have a lot of firebending cards, this will help us cast stuff at flash speed on combat and draw cards. Another option to get us a good amount of cards in our hand is Waterbender Ascension. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a quest counter on this enchantment. Then if it has 4 more quest counters, you draw a card. This is going to be very easy to achieve the more we swing in. Then it basically acts as a coastal piracy, but not only that, it does have Waterbend 4. This is working with our commander too, because it's an enchantment on the battlefield that we could essentially waterbend at any time. But now I wanted to shift my focus and talk about another card draw engine with the Ungai of Koishi Island. I butchered that completely. This has flash so that you can flash it on another opponent's turn, catch people off guard. It has ward, Waterbend 4, and whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw 2 cards. Most people usually have card draw engines in the command zone, so it's going to be more easy than not to draw 2 cards on each turn potentially. But in this section, I saved the best for last, and that's Wan Shi Tong Librarian. This is a very cool episode where the gang gets into a library and they have to share knowledge to enter with Wan Shi Tong. And of course, that works perfectly in harmony with this card and what it does. It has flash, flying, vigilance. It has an X cost with 2 blue mana. You could pay as much as you want into it or none at all. Of course, the more you put X into it, the more you can put 1/1 counters on it and then draw half the X cards rounded down. But not only that, whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. With the amount of tutoring in Commander, this is going to be insane in my opinion. Most likely you are going to draw an insane amount of cards depending on people fetch, tutor, or even search their libraries with ramping. The sky is seriously the limit with this one. So now that I've talked about ramp and card draw, I now wanted to focus focus on interaction. There is a whole secret lair that talks about interaction with my cabbages, and honestly, it's an overused joke in my opinion. I don't think it's that funny anymore. At first, I thought it was funny, but Wizards of the Coast loves to ruin a joke every so often. But this has some great interaction spells like Chain of Vapor, which will bounce a creature, or really any non-land permanent. You have Meltdown, which will destroy each artifact with mana value X or less. Nature's Claim, Anguish Unmaking, and Putrefy. All these are very good interaction spells to destroy stuff or bounce stuff. Also in the secret lair, you have Lightning Bolt, you have Silence. So if somebody tries to combo off with a big storm turn, you could just cast Silence and your opponents can't cast any spells this turn. That is very powerful. Or even like Force of Vigor, this is another great one. Destroy up to 2 artifacts or enchantments, or you can cast this for free if you exile a green card. So again, there's a lot of removal spells or really any kind of interaction, of course, in the main set or even in the bonus sheet too. Also within this deck, I did include the 5 Ikoria free spells that if you have a commander, you could cast the spell for free. So like Deadly Rollick, Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat, and the other 2 that I forget their names because they're not used as much. These are some of the best spells that you can play in any kind of deck. If you wanted to make this deck a bracket 1 or even a bracket 2 deck, you would have to leave out Fierce Guardianship because it is a game changer. But other than that, if you just want to have it in the list, definitely go for it. I'm honestly very glad that they reprinted these because they always need new reprints, and honestly some pretty awesome art too. So I know I took a lot of time to talk about the staples of the deck, but now I wanted to go over mastering the 4 elements. Of course, there's air, fire, earth, and water. I'm going to talk about some of the best of them, not all of them in my opinion, because that would take a long time in this video. So let's first start off with airbending. And what better way to kick things off by talking about his best companion, and of course that's Appa, Steadfast Guardian. This acts as a protection spell. Of course, Appa is fiercely loyal. He has flash flying, and when he enters, airbend any number of other target non-land permanents you control. And whenever you cast a spell from exile, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. I like this one a lot because all you're really doing is casting the spell from exile for 2 mana. That's not a bad state in my opinion. Another card that airbends is Avatar's Wrath. This also is pretty good too. Choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all the others. Until your next turn, your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, then exile Avatar's Wrath. This is very good as a removal spell. It's going to take the next turn of your opponents in order for them to cast them again, and this kind of gets around indestructible too, so that is also very good. I also wanted to focus on one more airbending spell with Aang, Swift Savior. This works as a great interaction spell. When it enters, airbend up to 1 target creature or spell, so that counts on a spell on the stack or a creature on the battlefield. Also, you can waterbend a transform Aang, so it's almost like 2 in 1. It enters, you could airbend, and also when you waterbend, you can transform him into Aang and La, Ocean's Fury. It has reach and trample, and when it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control. So this is good almost as a game closer. So those are some great airbending spells. I didn't want to mention every individual one, but now let's move on to some waterbending spells. I already mentioned one like Waterbender Ascension. This one is actually really good for what it does, but I also like Katara, Water Tribe's Hope. This is the first person Aang encounters along with her brother, but she also has a very good and powerful ability that could act as a win con. You waterbend X, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX until in a turn where X can't be 0. So you can actually just pay 1 mana honestly into this, and then you waterbended. That will help count for Aang's ability to flip over. But not only that, of course, if you have a huge board state with a lot of creatures, you can just waterbend a couple of them and give all your creatures plus something depending on how much you waterbended. So obviously Katara, Water Tribe's Hope is a very powerful commander, but also great in the 99. In the last waterbending card I wanted to highlight is You, the Moon Spirit. This one is really good, especially if you have a lot of high CMC non-creature spells like the Great Henge that you want to cast. Instead, you could just waterbend 5 and tap it, and then cast that for nothing essentially without paying its mana cost. So far we have airbending, waterbending. Now we're going to go into the earthbending, and what better way to start that off with Toph. She's one of the greatest earthbenders, if not the greatest to ever exist. I'm not a big personal fan of Toph, the first metal bender in this deck. I don't think it works as well as I think it does. I would prefer Toph, Hard-Headed Teacher, mainly because when it enters, you may discard a card. If you do, return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, so you could utilize those spells once again. And not only that, whenever you cast a spell, Earthbend 1, if that spell was a lesson, you put an additional +1/+1 counter on it. It works with lessons, but we don't really have too much lessons in here. Of course, we do have a couple, but again, not much. I like this for the earthbending. You can constantly earthbend the more you cast spells, so that's why I like it. Also, the more we earthbend, the more Boomy is going to be very powerful. It has trample, and when it enters, Earthbend 4, and when it deals combat damage to a player, untap all lands you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Only land creatures creatures can attack during that combat phase. This is extremely strong and quite powerful, getting you those additional combats, and of course if you have a lot of lands that are creatures on the battlefield, the more you're swinging for more damage. Of course, we do have another version of Aang at the Crossroads. This does have a really good ability of entering the battlefield and cheating a creature onto the battlefield too with mana value 4 or less. But not only that, if a creature you control leaves the battlefield, you transform Aang at the beginning of the next end step into Aang Destined Savior, which land creatures you control have vigilance, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you earthbend too. So this is a constant way of earthbending and making sure we're swinging in for a ton of damage with vigilance. And of course, if we have Boomy on the battlefield, we're going to be swinging in for that much more damage. So with that last chapter out of the way, we're at the final chapter with firebending, and what better way to kick things off with Azula. Azula is quite menacing. It has firebending too, and not only that, whenever you cast something on combat, you get to copy it. So whether it's a flash spell or an instant spell, you just get to directly copy it. And we do have a lot of flash creatures that we could utilize, or things that we could cast at flash speed. That also does include Mei and Zuko. You may cast ally spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. We have a lot of allies in this deck, plus this has firebending 3, so this will help us get that ability online, all the while casting things synergizing with Fire Lord Azula. The first main antagonist of the Avatar series is Zuko, so what better way to put him in a deck than Fire Lord Zuko? He has firebending based off of his power, so the more power you have on him, the more you're going to be firebending. And of course, he has a play from exile theme, buffing up your creatures when you play something from exile or something from exile enters the battlefield. This actually works very well with airbending, so that's why I wanted to include him in this list, because he has multiple uses just outside of his ability. So Zuko may have been the first antagonist of the show, but he wasn't the main antagonist. That goes to Ozai the Phoenix King, and what a card this is. This has all sorts of stats. Even though technically it's not an ally, it doesn't necessarily work with our strategy. I wanted to throw him in anyways because he's quite powerful. Trample, firebending 4, and haste, and if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes red instead. Ozai has flying indestructible as long as you have 6 or more unspent mana, and he has a 7/7 body. What's not to say about this commander? It is absolutely absurd. And I know I said commander, but it's really a legendary creature in this deck. Sorry, sometimes I just get excited about Ozai the Phoenix King, but this is extremely strong, especially with a lot of firebending in this deck. We can just save that mana for a later turn and get a lot of use out of him. So of course, those are the 4 elements in action: air, water, earth, and fire. But now I wanted to talk about some of the best cards in this list, and let's start off with Katara the Fearless. Obviously, this is a doubling effect for all the allies we control, and about 99% of this deck are allies besides Fire Lord Ozai or even Fire Lord Azula. But outside of that, basically every creature in this deck is an ally. Of course, this works very well with Aang because instead of getting 1 card draw whenever we do any kind of bending, we get essentially 2. That is huge. But of course, any other triggers we have with our allies, the more we're going to get out of them. Another powerful card that could help us win the game would be Appa the Vigilant. What better way to close out the game with Aang and Appa? That's flying and vigilance. Whenever Appa or another ally you control enters, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying and vigilance until end of turn. Honestly, it is kind of surprising to see how much people don't play flyers or cards with reach. So having a way to give all our creatures +1/+1 vigilance and flying can help us close out the game. Not only that, Sokka's charge can help us close out the game too. During your turn, allies you control have double strike and lifelink. That is incredible, especially with Avatar Aang. If we have enough counters on him, we could close out the game by one-shotting one opponent. So that is the entire list. Of course, there's a lot of ways to win the game just with all of the firebending, waterbending, earthbending, and airbending. There's so many ways, and it's quite ridiculous. This is a little bit more of a janky strategy, mainly because we're only using cards from Avatar The Last Airbender. So I would like to hear from you. What are your thoughts about this deck? Is there any other includes that you would throw in? I do have a deck list down below in the description if you wanted to check it out a little bit more and kind of compare and contrast too. I do think Avatar Aang is a great leader as far as a only Avatar set deck goes. He gives you card draw, and if you manage to flip him, he will cost reduce all your spells, and if you flip him back, you just gain a lot of abilities like gaining life, drawing cards, putting 1/1 counters on him, and dealing 4 damage to each opponent. That is a lot all in one card. So obviously this is powerful, and there's a lot of powerful cards within the set. So on your way out, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.